All right, Kristin, what do you think? Can we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready for you.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Well, I can't see everybody because we have a pretty healthy list of attendees right now, but thanks for joining us for our first Hello Burlington webinar of 2024. And we're super, super pleased to have Kristin. Can I go with Bogovich? You have Kristin Howard in there. I don't want to make sure nobody's confused. Okay,
Yep.
Kristin works with WCAX and Gray Digital Media as a media strategist. She's also worked with Hello Burlington pretty closely since our inception. We're not currently vendor partners, but we still stay very, very much in communication, and the road is long. I have a feeling we'll be vendor partners in one way or another in the future, no matter what happens. But she has extensive experience with video strategy and video marketing strategy. She's also has been the key marketing person for the Spirit of Ethan Allen, the cruise lines in Burlington Harbor. And so she's got a really interesting background in travel and tourism, as well as video strategy planning, which makes her the perfect person to kind of be presenting this for us and to this audience at this moment in time. We do have some folks on the call that are actually not specific to travel and tourism. I think a lot of what Kristin is going to talk about will be kind of framed around our specific industry, but much of it is very relevant, broadly speaking, to any industry whatsoever. So if you have questions that are specific to you and your business, if it's outside hospitality, don't worry about it. Please throw them out to the floor, because I think every question and every answer on this subject is pretty relevant, regardless of what our backgrounds are or who we're working with. I also just wanted to mention, I actually spent about 20 years as a commercial video producer in my earlier life. So this subject matter is really near and dear to my heart. And I think over that period of time, we've seen a couple things happen. Most importantly, video has just moved from this very pricey option for those with really deep pockets to basically a must-have for everybody. I don't want to date myself, but when I got started in this business, hard drives, I'm not kidding, I am dating myself, hard drives that were fast enough to edit video typically cost about $100 a gigabyte. So that 18 gigabyte drive was $1,800 and was built like a tank, and you could run a tank over it if you wanted to. Things have changed dramatically. We all have really, really high quality cameras in our pockets on us at all times that have a lot more storage on them than 18 gigabytes. And more importantly, the distribution channels have just proliferated. You not only have broadcast, you've got YouTube, you've got streaming services, you've got TikTok, you've got all kinds of places to put that video content that the consumer sees as far more compelling. The other thing that I think we've noticed as this, the quality of origination has gotten better and better and cheaper, and the platforms have proliferated, is that people are pretty good about making content. They can make little snippets, little reels, little things like that, but nobody's gotten that much better at understanding what to do with that content and how to roll that out and how to make choices amongst that proliferation of distribution channels. So that's really what today is going to be about, not so much on what you should shoot in terms of the technical aspects or the creative aspects, but effectively how you can use this as a marketing tool as part of your marketing portfolio. And with that, I'll shut up and I'm going to kick it over to Kristin. Again, thanks so much for joining us, Kristin. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Kristin, as Jeff said. I've spent 3 years at CAX as a marketing consultant and a media buyer. And again, I was with the Spirit for about a decade as their marketing person. So I'm really excited to talk about video today. We will cover about 3 of those tactics. Unfortunately, we can't fit them all in because there are so many different types now. But today, I want to start with why this presentation is called Sight, Sound, and Motion. And then we're going to touch on 3 of the types of video advertising. So we'll talk a little bit about broadcast. We'll go into connected TV or CTV or OTT, as you may have heard it called before. And we will also cover some on YouTube. I have Q&As scattered throughout after each tactic. So please feel free to reach out and ask a question anytime. Don't feel like you're interrupting. That is totally fine with me. And then at the end, we'll cover some best practices and have a longer Q&A session. So first, again, I want to dive into why this presentation is called Sight, Sound, and Motion. So this is a term that I have heard a lot in the last 3 years and probably not much before that. But in the golden era of broadcast, sight, sound, and motion were this brand new trio of magic ingredients that allowed brands to connect with their consumers for the first time ever. They had connected in the past, perhaps verbally over radio, through print, but sight, sound, and motion is what really brought it together. So in those earliest days of video advertising, we were connecting with brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and notably, those are all still brands that use broadcast advertising today. And of course, they also use digital marketing platforms for video and other activities. So I actually wanted to start this off by asking everyone to just think about a commercial that impacted you. Think about something in your childhood that you still remember today. I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds. And if you just want to drop in the chat some of those commercials and what you remember about them, that would be awesome.
And do drop those in the chat just so everybody knows Kristin can't actually see you while she's presenting. So we're going to moderate this for her a little bit.
Thank you. All right, so I don't know if anyone's put anything in the chat, but I will start with mine and you can add to a chat if you want. For me, it's a Crayola commercial that I remember the most. And it's a little boy and he has this blonde bowl cut and he's got a dog. The dog's name is Benji. It's his best friend. He's coloring a tree. And immediately I remember this sunny spot in my childhood home where I used to color. And I think that's the whole point. Sight, sound, and motion are really, really powerful. 30 plus years later, I can actually still smell a fresh box of Crayola crayons when you open it. I can still feel the warmth of that sunny spot. So sight, sound, and motion actually transcended to different emotions and feelings. So I can smell, I can feel from sight, sound, and motion. And I think that's pretty crazy. But I also think it's pretty crazy that when I go to a store, I'm still going to buy Crayola because of this commercial and the branding that they've done over all these years. That's brand recognition. And that started when I was 5 years old. And I think that's pretty crazy. So I think that goes to show that when you do commercials well, we're really able to evoke emotion to tell a story, and it just takes some of that creativity. So I heard some dings, and I think that means some people wrote about some commercials they remember.
Yeah, we've got some good ones, Kristin. Just quickly, Nick's got Find Your Greatness from Nike. Nice. We got 2 from Budweiser, one for the Budweiser Clydesdales, and then the Frogs, Budweiser.
Yep.
And then Sarah McLachlan, SPCA. I remember that one for sure. West Virginia tourism ads. Jennifer, is that the Almost Heaven campaign that they have recently?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I thought so. Those are dynamite. Really, really good. And Rachel Cloutier would like to buy the world of Coke. Of course, we all would.
Love that one.
Bill Calfee, Apple commercial from 1984. Yeah,
that one. That one is probably. I am so happy that someone brought up the Apple 1984, because that was probably one of the biggest and most famous commercials that ever ran. But I think we all have these thoughts in our heads. I mean, I think everyone missed the horses this year at Super Bowl because they didn't do a horse and puppy commercial. And even though that doesn't speak to beer at all, that's what we were waiting for, and they didn't do it. So I think it's just really a powerful tool, and there's really no other platform that delivers like sight, sound, and motion. So I think it's a very, very impactful way to kind of bring your message out and also be able to connect with people on a very, very different level. I think Budweiser is a great example where a lot of people didn't care about Budweiser at all, but you bring in some puppies and all of a sudden there's a whole brand message around that has nothing to do with the brand. So again, it's just a very, very powerful way to connect with people. And I think that in the hospitality industry, a lot of us are so lucky because we have visual allure, and that's really special. For me, coming from the spirit, that was always so easy because I could post a picture of a sunset and immediately I would get a ton of likes on social media because it was a sunset. You could post food pictures, you can post pretty much at people having fun, a wedding, and those are all these easy money shots to grab. And so we're really, really lucky in the hospitality industry that we have an easy product to market. And since there are people on this call who are not from that hospitality industry, I want to provide a little bit of maybe hope for you that really you can turn anything into visual allure. It just takes that creativity. So when I started working at CAX, I took on a client in the traffic flagging industry. And that is very much not an easy subject matter to work with. And their entire goal was actually to hire flaggers, which again, not visually appealing, very, very difficult. This is still today probably one of the hardest industries that I work with for marketing. So again, not visually appealing. Over the last 3 years, we did do a lot of employee testimonials, benefits. During the peak of the pandemic, we were very focused on pay because that was what moved people. It was not easy to create these commercials, but they were still effective. So I want to flash forward to 2024. And they said, Kristin, this year we're going to do the Super Bowl. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. What do you want to say in the Super Bowl? And so they said, we had a really hard year and we want to thank our flaggers. Okay, we're going to make it happen. And that's going to be really tough, but we're going to make it happen. So, they're also looking to get more recognition statewide, to kind of have a branding spot out there. So this was all kind of at the forefront of our mind. But the production team and I spent days trying to figure out, what are we going to do with this? We spent time working with the client to figure out what their core message was, and what they wanted this to evoke, what feelings they wanted this to show. And so we spent days, we figured this out. We spent days actually on the ground in the cold with their flaggers filming. And I am going to show you the result of all of that hard work, hopefully, if this slide works. Okay.
In a world constantly on the move, we pause to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the unsung heroes keeping our streets safe. Your tireless efforts ensure smooth journeys for us all. Thank you for navigating our roads with precision and dedication. Your work doesn't just manage traffic, it keeps our communities safe and moving forward. To the many faces of ADA traffic control, thank you for putting our community first.
So I saw this spot for the first time before the client, and I actually cried a little bit. It was ridiculous. I never thought in a million years that I would get slightly teary-eyed watching a spot about flaggers, and I was so impressed with my production team, and I do have to give credit to them. This was produced and filmed by Matt Green, script written by Jen Bergeron. They did an amazing job. So this spot aired just this past Sunday at the Super Bowl, and the impact was huge. I got to catch up with them the next day. Our goal was to put as many ADA faces in here as we could, and so we had about 10 different faces. They were all having a giant Super Bowl party, and somehow they managed to keep this spot a complete surprise to all of their employees. So they got to see it all together for the first time. They had no idea it was happening. They knew we'd been filming, but they didn't know for what. And so everyone was just floored. And then right after the spot aired, everybody's phone blew up. There were just dings, is what they told me. There was just dings all throughout the room because people kept saying, oh my God, I just saw you on the Super Bowl. Oh my God, I just saw ADA on the Super Bowl. And it was a really powerful moment for them to be able to see just the magnitude that that spot had. And I think this is just a great case study to say, no matter the subject, no matter the content, no matter how visually appealing or not, sight, sound, and motion can bring any project to light, and it can really create a connection between a brand and its audience. So I just thought that was really cool. Next up, we're just going to talk a little bit about video advertising and the impact in the industry today. So when we look at video advertising in 2024, the projection is that we're going to see about $81.03 billion spent in this field. And the crazy thing is that in 2020, this number was at $49.5 billion. So we've grown about $30 billion in just 4 years. That's a massive, massive percentage. And when we look at who's using video advertising, I mean, we've heard it for years, video. I'm pretty encouraged to see some of these stats. So about 91% of businesses are using video marketing as some sort of tool. And about 96% of those business owners say that video is a really, really important part of their marketing strategy. And very much rightfully so, 90% of consumers are watching videos on their mobile devices. And that obviously does not count all the people who are watching video across every other device that we have, TVs, tablets, desktop. And it makes sense. We process video about 60 times faster than we process text. And it really, as we've been talking about, ignites that emotional and personal connection. And we've also found that it really does entice viewers to seek more information. So it makes sense that businesses have latched onto this as a great tactic. And another really important thing when you're engaging with something like connected TV or broadcast, we found that 88% of viewers are simultaneously using a digital device. I would love to not see, but if you want to give a show of hands, if you do the double streaming, I know I am a huge double streamer. If I'm watching something on the TV, I am definitely also on my phone. And that really allows us to look up things all the time. So you see something compelling on TV, oh, your phone's right there, you can research it. So that's really powerful. And what they found about that is online and TV viewers are almost 30% more likely to actually make a purchase of a product or service than the people who just watch TV without their phone. So having that second screen there and knowing that 88% of viewers are doing that double screen, that's a lot of opportunity to get in front of people while you have that research device right there to kind of learn more about your business. And with that, we'll transition into broadcast specifically. I will be mostly talking about local news and the connectivity and influence that broadcast and local news has, but this broadcast does still include syndicated news programming, prime time. We obviously still cover special events like the Grammys, sporting like the Super Bowl, and so on. So there's a lot of different things, but we only have so much time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about local news. So local news is considered the most trusted news source, local TV news, and our websites and our apps are considered the most trusted digital source. I don't think that anyone is going to be surprised when I say that social media is the least trusted platform. Thank God. I hope that it's the least trusted platform. We also see that broadcast TV is tuned into for most local news, even for streamers. So I want to take a minute to talk about this one. Back when I was buying broadcast for the first time about a decade ago, and I was buying the 6 o'clock evening news on WCAX, it was about 50,000 for an average audience size. And now when I look at these numbers, our 6 o'clock news reaches anywhere from 25 to 35,000, depending on the time of year. But things have really, really changed in the last decade. So WCAX and all of the other networks can be found on a multitude of different sources. Not only do we have our website platforms where we have live stream and we have pre-roll, we also have a ton of streaming services. So we have our own streaming app. We have a variety of different things like Hulu, YouTube. Those platforms actually buy WCAX to put on their live versions. And that's really interesting. Why did they do that? How can you offer live TV without offering your local news? So again, Hulu Live, YouTube Live, Fubo, we actually are streaming on all of those platforms. So the news has just really fragmented. We look at just kind of the over-the-air numbers as the live-all be-all, but it's just not true. When we were looking at live stream a decade ago, we would sell out of impressions because there were so few. But now we can have up to 1.3, 1.6 million impressions on our live stream every single month. So when you look at how the world has fragmented, you can almost think of it the same as streaming sources. Now, how do you even choose which streaming platforms to buy because there are so many? It's the same for local news. So people are still absolutely watching TV. They're still watching local news, but they're doing it on their time, just like everything else. Everything is expected to be on our time and that you can stream anything anywhere. So it's just a really different viewpoint of where the people have gone. It's just different. They've moved to digital services. TV still has the highest reach and time spent on all media platforms studied for every single age group and every category measured. And that's actually something I hear a lot. Nobody watches TV anymore. Everybody still watches TV. We are all still consuming media. And what we see is just that the fragmentation is all over the place. How do you know which apps to buy, and it changes all the time. So TV is still a very valuable thing, whether that's broadcast, whether that's connected TV, whether you're buying YouTube Live, it's still very powerful. And we also find that broadcast sites add a lot more reach to broadcast TV. And this is going to be true for all of your local news outlets. So for example, our website is obviously adding a lot to our actual over-the-air platform. So when we look at the average audience age of our broadcast over the air, it's usually 40 plus. And I don't think that surprises anyone either. But when we look at our website traffic, our top age demographics are 25 to 54. And so we're seeing a little bit of duplicity in that audience, but our site skews a lot younger and our over-the-air skews a lot older. Unfortunately, we're not as able to get super granular data for some of those streaming services because YouTube does not care if WCAX says, hey, we're curious how many times people streamed CAX. They won't answer us. But it's still really interesting to know that reach is added and it reaches a different demographic on our site than actually over the air. So then we kind of look at what local news does for us. And I'm going to bring up a case study that we're all going to be very fresh and familiar with. We had our flood in July of this year. And in a time of crisis, the significance of local news automatically becomes undeniably apparent. There was a really, really big impact on our state, and we were able to capture the audience change through both our ratings and also through our analytics. And it just revealed a depth of coverage and communication that you absolutely cannot get on national platforms. The surge in viewership, the surge on our site traffic during this time period was absolutely insane. And I'm going to share some of those numbers with you, but it just shows that the news plays a really indispensable role when it comes to newsworthy events. Oftentimes that does mean catastrophic events, but generally newsworthy events. So the first thing that we're going to look at is our actual over-the-air numbers. So the pink line on the bottom represents the average audience size in July of 2022, and that is measured every 15 minutes for each program, and then we take the average over the entire month. So for example, our 5:30 p.m. news was showing 14,400 in 2022. The yellow line represents July 10th, very specifically July 10th, the day of the flood. So you can see that differentiation grow throughout the day. And it's really crazy to see. I mean, our 5:30 news almost doubled. So when you look at these numbers, it's a really good case study to prove people were tuning in to local broadcasts to get this information and to figure out what was happening in their community. And while unfortunately we were on national news for what happened across Vermont and in our capital, they were not able to provide the information that was really relevant and really needed for locals. Where do I get help? Who has a shelter? Who's got charging stations that I can go to? That was covered by local news. So it's a good case study for how important this is to our community. Second component of graphs is our site traffic. This is straight from our analytics. So the top graph is our page views. So on an average month, we were seeing 7 to 8 million page views. In July, we actually hit 12.5 million page views. We have to realize that, of course, the flooding was not just one day. It was a lot of coverage. So there was a lot of residual coverage after July 10th. But these are really, really big spikes in analytics traffic. And as you can see, there were no spikes before. So when you look at kind of the bottom graph, which is video plays, we were seeing on average 700 to 900,000 video plays every month. We actually spiked at 1.3 million in July. So what I also find really interesting is it remained elevated after the fact. And I think that's because a lot of people came to us as a source. Maybe they hadn't been with us for a little while, and then they came back and said, you know what, that is really impactful. Maybe I should be looking into this more. So, again, on video plays, you can see that we've been consistently hitting that million mark for quite a while now, from October through January, but we weren't before. So it's just a really interesting piece to kind of consider when we look at these events. And I'm going to cover one more, and I think we can all guess where it's going: the pandemic. 2020 obviously was a really, really rough year, and broadcast was there for everybody. And I'm not talking CAX, I'm talking every local news outlet. When Scott had his press conferences 5 days a week, if we can remember back to that time, we had WCAX, NBC, 2244, 7 days. Everybody was covering the press conferences. And eventually these went down to 3 times a week, down to 1 time a week. But we couldn't turn to any national source for the pandemic. We really had to stick with our local news outlets because everyone else was covering national and global data. The states were all on their own. So it was just really prominently apparent that local news was very, very significant. So it's just an interesting case study. So why should you do local broadcast? That was kind of about local. This is why. So I always say that broadcast is best described by its name. It's a broadly cast net of people that you're trying to reach. This is not as targeted as a lot of other tactics. You're able to reach a mass audience. Another thing that we can do is demographic targeting by program. And it's definitely not as granular as a lot of digital platforms, but a good example I like to use is Rachel Ray, who is no longer on the air. But I think we can all have a decent guess of who's watching Rachel Ray at 9 a.m, Monday through Friday. Things like This Is Us. It's going to skew heavily female. So we have things that we also have very definitive metrics that show us. You can always ask what kind of targetability you can find. Is it a higher household income? Is it a homeowner? These are all components that you can reach. Credibility is the next one, credibility and authority. Think of all the big businesses that still advertise on broadcast, and it's because they want to be aligned with that trusted news source. So I'm thinking Apple, Samsung, Google, Microsoft, they don't have to advertise, but they do because they want to keep that top of mind awareness. And that's essentially the biggest thing that broadcast is going to provide is that top of mind awareness. Broadcast also creates more engaging relationships and connections with the audience. So of course, that's going to be a big component of why you want to be on this platform, delivering to that broad audience. And I know that digital is all the rage, and we're going to talk about a lot of digital, but I still think that traditional marketing has its place in the world. It's obviously crucial to do digital marketing, but broadcast can really actually provide a different avenue to reach a different audience. So I actually have a client in the Burlington area, and they had always been in the Burlington area. They didn't want to expand too much further outside of the touching counties to Chittenden County. But then they decided that they would go on broadcast. And then they got a ton of calls from Rutland, and they actually got calls and conversions from Rutland. And they were so surprised by this because their assumption was that they were not going, they shouldn't be in Rutland. No one was going to come all this way to buy their product, but they were wrong. And broadcast actually allowed us to see that we had that connection. They wanted to come because they didn't have that same product in Rutland. So they were able to open up their audience and actually grow in a lot larger areas of the state to be able to bring in new business. And that was never on their radar. So it's just a great way to kind of make sure that you're not pigeonholing yourself into a geographic region that you think is your only space to advertise in. So just some best practices about broadcast, how to build an effective broadcast schedule. So first, we really want to see a 3 frequency. Frequency is when you look at your entire schedule, and this is on average the amount of time someone is going to see your spot. It is extremely difficult to capture a high frequency in a very short time. So if you're interested in running a 2-week flight, probably not going to achieve that frequency. You really want to achieve consistency over a long time. And the reason is because this is a broadcast net, because this isn't targeted. So when you're trying to reach everybody, you really need your message to be seen enough times to make an impact. And for broadcast, typically that number is about a 3. The second one, we have something called bookends. So you can run a 30-second commercial, or you can run a set of bookends. So that's when you have one commercial at the start of the break and then another at the end of the same break. Bookends allow you to advertise 2 different products. And I think that's really fun because we do have some companies who really have 2 different product lines, or just generally maybe want to advertise a specific product and also keep a branding spot running. So that's just kind of a creative way to do a buy. Make sure you're really speaking to a broad audience. When you're speaking to broadcast, you really don't want to pigeonhole to a specific demographic. I'm going to use a spirit example here, weddings. We try and keep our language very broad in our broadcast messaging because we're hoping that we get a lot of referrals. It's not just the couples who are going to find us. We're also hoping to see parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends say, oh my God, actually, did you see that the Spirit offers welcome parties for weddings? So it's really speaking to everybody. When we do digital, it's a lot more targeted and tailored to the couple. So that's really important to make sure your messaging aligns with media. Have your really clear call to action that goes for most brands and most platforms. But it's obviously really important. If you don't have that call to action, then you're just branding. Don't expect to see too much. Last thing, ask about attribution capabilities, because a lot of broadcast outlets now have these. They're not a one-to-one match per se, but they do show trends. So our attribution capability, you can actually see when your commercial airs, it'll measure a 10-minute time period of your analytics to show if there was movement on your website after your commercial aired. Again, that's not a one-to-one match. It's not perfect. But if you run for a year, we can say, wow, every Sunday when your spot aired on the CBS Morning News, we always saw a spike, and that spike wasn't there before. So we're really looking for patterns, but there are new attribution capabilities so that people can actually have traditional media show them what it's doing. And so that's about it for broadcast. Do we have any questions immediately on broadcast?
Kristin, Allison had a quick question noting that trends have shown media sources are covering topics in a more negative, critical slant in recent years. How do you get local media attention to have them cover your business in a positive light? I'm actually just going to jump in and say that maybe you can talk offline with Allison about that, because that's really more about media coverage than media advertising. Sure. Allison, I don't mean to cut you off, but just so we can stay on topic, I can link you two up. So I think Kristin could probably help you with that question offline.
Yeah, absolutely.
If anyone else had a question pertaining to advertising, broadcast advertising specifically, go ahead and toss it in the chat. Nope, I think we're good. I think you can move right on.
All right, sounds good. All right, so the next one we're going to cover is connected TV or OTT. So this is a really different platform. I would say it's similar but different to broadcast. So it really sets a new standard, and it's a really modern, pivotal thing. So I'm going to start with the two most frequent questions I get about connected TV. What is it? How does it work? All right, so connected TV is an OTT is the other way you've probably heard it. And it's interesting because the name OTT actually comes from the name over the top, and it actually literally means it's going up over the top of your cable or satellite connection. So it's a really bizarre, unoriginal name. But anyway, connected TV is probably more commonly how you hear about it. It's simply the delivery mechanism for video, and it's coming through your Wi-Fi. So it is that you can stream anything on your device, but typically it's through a network or a platform. So that might be Pluto as a platform, or say HGTV as a network. And specifically how it works is it goes through your internet connection, whether that be Wi-Fi or through actual cables, but it is taking all of your IP address history, and we're able to target people because our IP address history tells us so much. So we're able to deliver that customized ad experience. So Jeff and I might be watching the exact same thing, but we're going to get served different ads because of what we do online. And I think it's really creepy, but at the same time, for the advertising side, it's an amazing way to reach people. One of the most granular examples I can give is we can find people based on what car they drive. Do they have a Honda? Do they have a Toyota? Is their lease expiring in 90 days? I mean, these things are really, really granular, and it's taking all of that information from how we behave online. So it is very, very tailored, and it's a really unique way to reach consumers. When we look at the OTT industry or the CTV industry, 2024 is projected to be $30.1 billion. And that's about a 22% increase over year spending. So it is a fast growing platform. And when we look at the benefits of connected TV, there are a lot. So the first one is that it's targetable. And that's obviously not something that broadcast has. Not only is it geo-targeted, but we can also target, like I said, to car makes. We can target to people who are interested in travel. We can target to people who are interested in live events. You can target to people who are left-leaning, right-leaning, independent. So there are just a ton of very, very specific things. And again, that's all data that's been collected from your internet activity. So it tends to, we consider that CTV is really at the top of the advertising funnel, but it is a little further down than broadcast, right? Because of how tightly you're able to target. Second, we find that it has a really captive audience. these people aren't just tossing on the TV and walking away from it. When you're streaming, you've probably spent 2 hours trying to figure out what to watch, and then you're actually going to sit down and watch your show. So the audience tends to lead to higher engagement and higher level of attention with the ads that appear. It's long form content. So this is really different from things like YouTube or kind of programmatic buys when you're showing up in maybe BuzzFeed articles for a quick pre-roll piece. But this is actually typically a show. It could be a movie. It could be a sporting event. So long form content obviously captivates people longer than a short piece that you might want to skip the ad because it wasn't worth reading about Kylie and Timothy Chalamet. It's non-skippable for the most part. Definitely check with the OTT provider, but for the most part, OTT is non-skippable. You cannot just fast forward through the commercial, so that leads to a very, very high viewer completion rate. Typically, that's well above 90 because, again, you're in front of that captive audience. We also have a cross-device reach, so it really doesn't matter if you're watching it on a connected TV, on a tablet, on a desktop, or on a smartphone. We're going to find you because it doesn't matter to us what platform we're on. It has really measurable results. So I just talked about attribution reporting in broadcast, but OTT and connected TV, obviously, as a digital platform, have a lot of different measurable results. We can obviously provide impressions, conversions, clicks. You can find if you have, and this is definitely a question you should ask your CTV provider, can you show me where every single impression lands and in which zip codes it landed in? That is proof of a tag certified content provider. That is the trusted authority group, and it means it's certified against ad fraud. So that's really important, and you really want to make sure that you're going to be able to see data that shows you every single network where you landed. We've kind of discussed this already, but geographic precision, being able to say, well, I just want to be in Burlington, or I just want to be in the New North End. I mean, this is a single zip code all the way up to national. So you can really do anything in between, but it is hyper geographically targeted. And then in some cases, you can also find innovative ad experiences. You may have experienced that out in the world, but they might ask you, hey, did you like your ad experience? Yes or no? Or it might allow you to click off to certain platforms. Some may not, just because the majority of their impressions are going to be shown on that large screen TV. So they may not provide that interactive experience, but some of them do. So that's definitely something that you should ask about if that's something that you're interested in. So Gray TV and Gray Digital Media have a nationwide presence. And over the last couple of years, they've really studied the halo effect of what advertisers see when they add connected TV to their current marketing mix. So this is kind of what they've seen. They've seen more attention to that brand in general. They've seen more qualified visits, which might mean more time on site, less bounce rate. Some of those stats are what are considered more qualified visits. They might see more opportunities to convert on ad channels across the board. And then for specific clients, they've tracked a 22% increase in pay-per-click conversions and a 9% increase in paid social conversions. So there is a really big halo effect when you add this into your marketing mix. And I think it's definitely something to consider as you look at your video marketing dollars, because it is a really unique platform where we can target. And just to take a quick look at Vermont-specific OTT and CTV viewer profile. This is pretty interesting. So we do this study typically once a year. So this is January 2023 data. So my guess is that these numbers are actually up a little bit higher. We'll see probably another one pretty soon come out for 2023. So we have about 88% viewer penetration. And again, my guess is it's up a little bit. So it's about 451,000 Vermonters who are reached via OTT. Device ownership is primarily streaming devices, but also smart TVs. So in the streaming devices, Roku is the top and Amazon Fire fall second, and Apple TV and Chromecast are the third place. I think this is really interesting, and I actually think that our user demographics are a little bit skewed just because of our older aging population. I find it really interesting. We're really pretty evenly split between men and women. Our average age is 48, which to me sounds so high. But again, when you look at the 55 plus number, 41% of the Vermont OTT viewers are 55 plus. So, we don't want to make these sweeping generalizations that only young people are on connected TV. They're not. But again, Vermont has a big aging population. So could be part of it. Our average household income is $82,805. That makes sense based on, our entire statewide population. 41% college graduates, over half married. Again, I would say that's also probably due to an older population. And then we also have 75% of people owning their home. And that's another one that I'll attribute to an older population. But so that's just kind of what the Vermont viewer profile looks like. So we are definitely here. People are definitely streaming in our state. So I think that's really interesting. And then lastly, we're going to look at best practices for connected TV. So when we look at how to make an effective OTT schedule, the first thing is you're going to consider your geography. Hold on to that one, and I'll explain that at the end. We're going to identify your target audience. Who do you want to reach? Is it travel intenders? Is it even in our state, or is it out of state? Is it a super granular, I want to reach people who have an interest in live events? Or is it broader than that? I want to reach people who have a household income of 150 or more, and they're maybe 35 plus, or maybe it's women. So again, think of how you actually want to target the audience. The next part is that you're going to want to identify the amount of maximum impressions in the area. So what we do in our process is that we have to pull a quote for how many max available impressions there are in the geography. So if you say, well, I want to reach women 35 plus in all of Vermont, you might find that in a single month, there are 3 million maximum impressions available. That's a really high number, because the next tactic is you're going to want to get 15 to 20% infiltration to really have a good coverage base in that area. Okay, well, we can't take 15 to 20% of 3 million. How do we bring this down? Maybe we're not going to do statewide. Maybe we're going to bring it down to 5 counties. And maybe that number then goes from 3 million down to, 500,000. Okay, maybe that's still too high based on the budget. So when we're refining our budget, we're also going to consider that geography and the target audience, because those components are going to help us figure out how to get that 15 to 20% infiltration. And that's about it for best practices for CTV. So does anyone have questions about connected TV? It's fantastic.
I think we're okay to keep moving on, Kristin.
Sounds good. All right. So the last tactic we're going to cover is YouTube. This is the world's biggest video stage, and I think we all know that. It's got a massive audience. It's global. It's got insanely diverse content, from children unboxing stuff to, some really high quality how-to videos on vehicles. So YouTube is just a really different space. And the thing that differentiates YouTube the most from broadcast or OTT is that it has a really interactive community. And what I would say about YouTube is it is probably one of the most crossover tactics that I can think of. So a lot of people are viewing YouTube on a big screen. So that kind of makes it like CTV. A lot of people are engaged on YouTube, and that kind of makes it like a social media platform. So it's just a really different type of space. There's short form content, there's long form content. It's really a chameleon in the world of video. So when we look at YouTube, why YouTube? It's the second largest search engine after Google. I think that's one of the most common stats. And so we are all probably pretty familiar with that. About 74% of viewers bought a brand after seeing it on YouTube. And I think some of those unboxing videos have something to do with that. About 94.4% of OTT viewers in the US are also watching YouTube. YouTube is actually the most watched digital platform in the US, with viewing by about 75% of adults, and Netflix comes in second at around 70. The average American spends about 24 minutes a day on YouTube. And I think this next one is one of the most shocking things to me. 75% of Americans are using YouTube, and only 69% are using Facebook. I was kind of surprised by that. I definitely thought they'd be a little bit closer, but that is definitely one of the big reasons that we need to be in this space, because there are so many people there. And finally, according to Google, YouTube is one of the company's biggest advertising revenue growth drivers. So we'll take a look at that. So I'm going to go from 2020 on. So we look at 2020, there was $19.7 billion spent on YouTube advertising. And obviously that was an anomaly year, super low. 2021, we jumped up to 28.8 billion. In 2022, 29.2 billion. And in 2023, we hit $31.5 billion spent on US advertisers on YouTube. That's just a staggering number. So when we look at the numbers for projections, YouTube and OTT are going to take up a massive percent of the video in the US's advertising dollars. And when we talk about all the different ways that you can target on YouTube, there are a lot, but they are all really, really cool. And they're all very granular. This one is much closer to bottom of the funnel because of some of these targeting capabilities. So we can use custom audiences. There are two types of those. We have affinity and affinity audiences and intent audiences. So affinity segments target by the actual media that people are consuming online, and intent is actually finding a person who's about to make a purchase for your service. So those are obviously really powerful segments. When we look at keywords, we can target by keywords. So that's really special too. And not every tactic offers something so granular. You can obviously not target by keyword on OTT, CTV, or broadcast. And this is really nice because if you're already engaging in Google pay-per-click, that means that you can also take your keyword list and run it over on YouTube to get that duplicity. There's topical marketing. So if you want to advertise to parents, you can be in kids programming. That's a really nice way to look at that. We also have in-market audiences, which also covers life events, and those are really powerful too. So when you think about new parents, weddings, divorces is typically the third one in that for big life changes. You can really, really target. And if you think about that, you could target mortgages to people who have recently been divorced. You could target rentals to people who are recently divorced, just the same that you can target diapers and start getting into people's heads when you find out that they're pregnant. So using the in-market audiences is a great way to really granularly target your audience. Definitely use remarketing whenever you can. It's tough nowadays because I think we all see that little cookie notification pop up, and a lot of people say, I don't want to be reached by you after. So our remarketing pool has shrunk really substantially. That's when someone does visit your website and we're able to keep serving ads to you. Typically, that's about a 90-day window that we continue to serve those ads. So again, we've seen a really big decrease in how many impressions we're getting in retargeting, but there are still some, and it's important to retarget to those people who have actually visited your site. So always take advantage of that. The best thing to me about YouTube is YouTube takes a targeting blend of tactics. So it's not just one of these, it's two or more of the tactics. And I think that really strengthens the campaign. So it's a very, very powerful and targeted source. And then the best practices for YouTube, we will always be looking for people to utilize companion banners. So if you have a video running adjacent to that, you can sometimes, depending on the ad type, put a companion banner, which is a static ad, and you can have that be a click-through to your site. So if you have the opportunity to use a companion banner with really compelling visuals that align with your message on your commercial, you can also increase your click-through rate there. You should also take advantage, if you are well branded already, of a 6-second bumper. That is very much branded specific because it's so short, but it's the little 6 seconds before your content airs. If you are well enough branded in the area that you want to be in, a 6-second bumper is a really, really impactful way to just say, hey, we're out here, don't forget about us. Again, creating that top of mind awareness. Use that topical marketing if you have a really specific demographic. Again, top example for me in the hospitality industry is weddings, conferences, events, things like that. So if you are able to really serve to people in the topical section, you're going to be able to reach people where they're at that purchase decision or they're thinking about it. We want to ensure that ads are optimized for mobile viewing because, of course, there's a lot of impressions that are still delivered on a mobile device. And then use all the targetability that you can, because all of them are really powerful. If you can't do one of them, I guess that's okay, but your goal should be to do as many as you possibly can because they do take that targeting blend. And finally, align your keywords with your Google pay-per-click campaigns because they're together. YouTube and Google, they're the same company. So it's only going to increase your SEO if you align those and you use them together. Any questions about YouTube before we dive into execution and how to create this video?
Go right ahead. And I think we're running tight on time here too.
We are, and I think we're just barely going to be able to get through all of it. So,
okay.
How do we execute all of it? So when we first start the process, we're going to plan our message, and we want to remember that the messaging is going to change as we move further down that funnel. Think of that example with the weddings. If you're speaking to broadcast, we're going to be speaking more broadly. When you're on digital, we're going to try and speak more to the couple because we have that capability to target. Define that arc of storytelling that you want to tell and figure out really the vibe that you want. But think of it like a story. What's your attention grabber for the beginning? What's the core or the middle of the message that you want to send? And what's the call to action that you're going to finish with? We also want to plan the delivery. So next, you're going to try and figure out what platforms you want to use. So identify the messaging for each type of platform and really target that to each audience. So you may be telling stories differently on broadcast, YouTube, and then you might have an even different way to tell it on social media. That's really important, and it really helps to create that messaging and that strength in your audience and that connectivity between your brand and your potential consumer. And then finally, just make sure you're optimizing that creative for each screen. So we've got Facebook and Instagram are sometimes square formatting. Digital is usually a trimmed version of the broadcast size. Broadcast can be really different from the rest because it's got to go over the air. So it's a very, very high quality piece. And usually we trim those down for digital because they are too high quality to load quickly. So just make sure that your producer knows all of the different specs that you're going to need for each tactic that you're going to work in. And finally, we'll cover a few best practices, do's and don'ts as you're creating your spot. So first, get a creative services team involved early. It's possible to film things on your phone. It's possible to do those things. But if you really want to make an impact in your audience, if you're really going to spend the money to do this right, involve that creative services team. Plan out that story ahead of time that you really want to tell. Again, find that beginning, that middle, and that end of your spot. Consider the engaging B-roll that you have that's going to help your audience with that story. B-roll is kind of that background video that's going on, say in a testimonial, someone's talking and then you cut to the video. Figure that out with your production team, but make sure that that happens before the shoot because you really want to be prepared and ready so this goes off seamlessly as you're actually executing. And finally, strategize those targeting layers and the different criteria that you're going to need for each tactic and each type. Don't make it more complicated than you need to because sometimes it's too much. You only have 15 to 30 seconds. That is not much time. So there's no need to think very complicated about what you want to do. Keep it simple. Don't wait to bring in that team because they might be able to help you with possibilities. What is possible? What is not? You might say, well, I really wanted this drone shot to start the spot. And your production team might come in and say, that's great, but unfortunately the wires are too low in your space to do that. So we can't do a drone shot. So don't start dreaming before you've got that person who can say, yes, we can do this, or I'm really sorry, that's not going to work. Third, don't forget that you know your brand, but your audience might not know your brand. So it's really important to take that step back from your business and say, okay, what do they need to know? And what do I know that they don't? So make sure that your messaging is not so in depth to your business that only you're going to understand it. And finally, do not use too many platforms. If your budget is such that you can only do broadcast, you can only do CTV, or you can only do YouTube, do not spread it so thin that each tactic suffers as a result. You really want to make sure you're doing one tactic right. And it's just like that in the social media world. Yes, there's a million platforms. Choose the one or two that you can do really, really well. Because I know a lot of us in the hospitality industry and the other industries are very low on staff. And sometimes we don't have a whole person that we can dedicate to these activities. So choose a couple platforms and do them really well. Do not spread it across too many. And that is it. Any questions at all?
Thanks so much, Kristin. Great job. Really, really interesting stuff. I'm just checking the chat here to see if there's any questions. A couple people say thank you very much. Very, very informative.
Okay, great. Well, please reach out anytime if you do have questions, or I know we're kind of running short on time, but contact my cell anytime, email me anytime. I'm happy to talk with you.
Yeah. And everybody, we'll make this, we'll shoot an email out tomorrow, make this recording available to anybody. And if you need Kristin's information and you aren't writing it down right here, just let us know at Hello Burlington and we'll pass it along quickly. Okay. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. Much appreciated and hope to see you soon. Kristin, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.